I hope you're all doing well. I'm just gonna do a few key points for chapter 7 tomorrow, for tomorrow's final. There's quite a few things to learn there, but I'm just gonna cover some main points of the idea of chapter 7. In chapter 7, we have involuntary and voluntary actions. A voluntary action involves conscious control, like walking or moving, but you consciously know that you're doing that. Involuntary actions include peristalsis because you cannot control it in a conscious state, or just reactions in your body. You cannot control your heart beating, you cannot control like digestion in your stomach because that is involuntary. Then we have reflex actions. They include when your pupils contract and when pupils contract when the light is encountered by the eye. That's a reflex action by your pupils because the light is shining at it, and your pupils have a reflex and they contract. Coughing when food particles touch the trachea. So if you choke or if any food particle goes near your windpipe or the trachea, you cough as a reflex to get it out. Withdrawing the hand rapidly from a hot object. Obviously, when you accidentally touch any hot object or something heated, for example, hot pots or pans in general, if you touch that, you rapidly withdraw your hand from it because you know it's hot, and that's a reflex. When you blink your eyes when an object touches the cornea, if something touches your eye or comes in your eye and you blink because that's a reflex action after something touches your cornea. Then we have neurons. We have motor neurons, sensory neurons, and relay neurons. Relay neurons are also known as interneurons. So starting with motor neurons, they carry nerve impulses from the central nervous system to its effectors, and it's characterized by the presence of many dendrites and a single axon. Sensory neurons, they carry nerve impulses from sensory receptors to the central nervous system, and it has a process that extends from the cell body and branches into two long processes. One of them is the peripheral and the other is central. The peripheral one extends to the sensory region, while the central extends towards the central nervous system. These two processes make up an axon. Now, relay neurons are also called interneurons, and they conduct nerve impulses between different parts of the central nervous system. For example, the spinal cord and the brain. Relay neurons can transmit impulses between sensory and motor neurons, and they're only found within the central nervous system. They're characterized by extensively branched dendrites and multiple terminals at the end of their axons. So they're quite branched, and you can see in the diagram in the quiz that they're quite different from the other neurons. Small gaps between neurons are called synapses. The nervous system includes the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the spinal cord and the brain, while the peripheral nervous system is made of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Now, and then we have the human eye. It has the lens, the retina, the cornea, the iris, and more. So, starting with these four, the lens change shape to ensure clear vision of nearby distant objects. The retina contains light receptors which are needed to produce visual images. The cornea bends light rays as they enter the eye, and the iris controls the amount of light allowed to enter the eye by either contracting or relaxing. The retina contains rods and cones. Optic nerves carry the nerve impulse from the eye to the brain. The fovea is where all cone cells are densely packed. The blind spot is where no light-sensitive receptors can be found. And the choroid is the black layer that absorbs excess light. The sclera is the white and opaque layer of the outer eye, and the pupil allows light into the eye. Now cones are what allow the visual of color and sharp images and are sensitive to bright light only, while rods detect motion in even dim light and their images are not that sharp. So this basically sums up the first part of it. And then we have the other part of chapter 7, which is mostly about drugs and nicotine. Nicotine and its effects. Nicotine is a component of the cigarettes that stimulates the central nervous system, and it binds to acetylcholine and imitates the action of it. Now, there's not much about this, but since we didn't cover it a lot in class, I'd say it's easier to understand it when you're doing the quiz. It has most of the information in it. Let's just see some questions in the quiz for chapter 7. So, as we said, this white part is the sclera. This is the iris. The radial muscles contracted and the muscles, the circular muscles contracted. So this is talking about the light and how the pupil is reflexing to it. In A, it contracted because of bright light, and in B, this is how it looks in dim light. So you can see it's more dilated when there's dim light. This is the same as the last question. Now this is a reflex arc. This part of it is a receptor. You can see here is the sensory neuron, the motor neuron is here. Then we have the relay neuron and the effectors at the end, and the motor axon is this curve here. So this diagram represents a reflex action, and in A, we can see this is A. This is the spinal cord. Moving on. This chapter is very much about memorization. If you do the quiz, it's quite easy to just do the quiz and memorize it, but as you please. So here we have the retina. As we said, it's the thin layer that lines the back of the eye. The optic nerve is the structure that carries the impulses to the brain. The fava is the region in the eye with the highest concentration of cone cells. The blind spot is the region of the retina where the optic nerve leaves the eye. Choroid is the black layer that absorbs excess light. And the sclera is the white, tough, opaque outer layer of the eye. Conjunctiva is the thin and delicate membrane covering the front of the eye. The pupil is the black circle at the center of the eye. Then we have the cornea. It's the transparent dome-shaped structure on the front of the eye. And the lens is a flexible structure that can change shape to focus light. So what do we have here? So choose the picture that shows the eye focusing on a distant object. You can see here. This diagram right here is what shows how the eye looks while it's focusing on a distant object. Choose the correct answers to describe the state of each part of the eye while focusing on a distant object. The ciliary muscles relax during this. The suspensory ligaments are tight and the lens is thin. So obviously, if you think about it, your ligaments are going to be a bit tight when you're trying to focus on something distant. Your ciliary muscles here are relaxed and the lens are thin. Okay. Axons and dendrites. Axon is they carry muscle impulses away from the cell body. They lack the endoplasmic reticulum. Dendrites are short and branched and they receive impulses from other neurons. Okay, as we said before, another name for the relay neuron is the interneuron. So this is the relay neuron. As you can see, they're branched and longer than these two. What is the function of the relay neuron? They conduct nerve impulses between different parts of the central nervous system. The central nervous system includes the spinal cord and the brain. Okay, so the diagram below shows the transmission. Okay, so this is a synapse. I feel like this is also something you should just memorize, honestly. These kinds of questions where they ask you to put things in order, I'm not even joking, they're always going to ask you these kind of questions. There's one from, I think, the respiratory system. It always comes in the exams. It's about breathing and how your respiratory system acts in order after a long exercise and how deep it was. I'll try and find that question, or even like the order how it is in the exam, and I'll let you guys know. So here we have the first step is sensory receptors in the skin send a nerve impulse along the axon of a sensory neuron to the spinal cord. Second, the sensory neuron passes the nerve impulse to several relay neurons that form synapses with motor neurons. Third, the nerve impulse transmitted by the relay neurons is carried down by the motor neuron axons from the spinal cord to the effector muscles. And last, we have the impulse causes some muscle groups in the hand to contract and causes others to relax so that the hand is withdrawn. So, the name of this action is the reflex arc. Why is the spinal cord the center of this action? A reflex arc follows the shortest path to the nearest part of the central nervous system. That's why. Okay, as we said before, rods detect motion in dim light and they provide images of low sharpness. Cones are sensitive to bright light and they allow the perception of color and sharp images. Okay, we did this. Okay. In the previous question, we saw that when the lens is focusing on a distant object, this is how it looks. Now when it's looking at a close object, you can see it's different. The ligaments would be loose instead of being tight here. Okay, so in dim light, the radial muscles of the iris contract while the circular muscles relax, and as a result, the pupil becomes larger and more light is allowed into the eye. In bright light, however, the radial muscles relax while the circular muscles contract. As a result, the pupils become smaller and less light is allowed into the eye. So this is just pupil reflex. These are just neurons again. Okay, this is related to the drug part of the chapter. Some drugs resemble a natural neurotransmitter in the body as they can bind to the receptors of this neurotransmitter. A drug may either imitate the action of the neurotransmitter or block its normal function. At which location does the action of such drugs take place? In the synapse. Now synapse, as we said here, a synapse, there are the small gaps between neurons. So this action of drugs takes place in the synapse, in the gap between neurons. What is the drug that resembles a particular neurotransmitter normally present in the brain and can stimulate the receptors of this natural neurotransmitter more strongly, causing a more intense response than what normally occurs in the body? It's called heroin. So it just resembles a particular neurotransmitter, and basically it can be a bit misleading and it's easier for the brain to stimulate with its receptors, and then it's even more intense because now their brain doesn't even know what it's doing. It's just thinking about it's confusing it from the normal neurotransmitters in the body because of how similar they are. Another question about orders. These questions are gonna come, there's no doubt. We have here number 1, impulses arrive down the axon of the presynaptic neuron. 2, the neurotransmitters are released from vesicles by exocytosis. Neurotransmitters diffuse across the synaptic cleft. Then neurotransmitters attach to their receptors on the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron. And finally, the impulse can continue along the postsynaptic neuron. This is another previous question. Which label represents the synaptic cleft? Number 4 here. You can see here, as we said, it's the gap between the neurons. So, clearly if it's the gap, this is the synaptic cleft. Which label allows an impulse to continue along the postsynaptic cleft? 3. Because through this gap, it's being able to have an axis to be continued. Which label represents the nerve impulse? The nerve impulse is number 1 here. So this is a relay neuron. It can be found in the spinal cord, and they conduct, because these neurons conduct nerve impulses between different parts of the central nervous system, and they transmit impulses between sensory and motor neurons. Okay, we did this question. Most of the questions are the same. In the nervous system, we have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is made up of spinal nerves and cranial nerves, while the central nervous system is made up of the spinal cord and the brain. Guys, I can't lie, if you just do this quiz about 3 times, you'll just understand everything in this. Okay, here we have the human skin. So over here we have A. This is the cornified layer. B is the epidermis. The first layer of the skin is literally called epidermis. So, we learned that last year as well. The second layer of the skin under the epidermis is the dermis, as you can see here. D, it's blood vessels. E is okay, here it's going here, nerve endings. Sorry, cells storing fat. Okay, you can see here there's cells. I'm not sure how to explain that, but they're storing fat. What is the function of A? A is the cornified layer. It's protecting living cells from infection, and it's protecting living cells from damage. Okay, so basically all the questions are repeating. There's not much to chapter 7. If you just go through it once, you can read the chapter summary in the book, but this is just the main idea. Neurons, reflex actions, the human eye, and voluntary actions. You should probably go over some of the drug parts, because I haven't covered that exactly. It's not that much mentioned, so you can go over that. Other than that, good luck. I'll send the past papers as usual on the Google Drive after solving them. So good luck for tomorrow. Bye guys.